sharing thoughts. So it is. I'm very excited today to introduce Brandy Ekren, who is doing a keynote for us today. Brandy Ekren is the executive director of Traverse City Light and Power. As the executive director, she is responsible for the strategic execution and operation of the municipally owned electric and telecom utility. She reports directly to the TCLP board of directors, who are responsible for utility governance, policy, and rate making. Her passion for energy and community resilience fueled her growth and advanced her career of the last 18 years. Prior to joining TCLP in March of 22, Ms. Ekren worked for the Lansing Board of Water and Light, starting out as an associate attorney, advancing to general counsel, and rounding out her career with Michigan's largest municipally owned electric utility as their executive director of strategic planning and development. Ms. Ekren brings with her extensive experience with strategic planning, renewable portfolios, and strategic and innovative initiatives, including clean energy program development, revenue diversification, and microgrids, which will be a tremendous asset as the utility moves into the future. Ms. Ekren received a Bachelor of Arts with honors and a Juris Doctorate cum laude from Michigan State University. And with that, Brandy, I'm going to turn it over to you. And just so everyone knows, the way this is going to work is Brandy is going to do a presentation for us. I've got some questions to ask, and I will encourage folks to utilize the chat as you have questions, thoughts, reactions. Feel free to just put them in the chat, and I will be moderating and lifting up participant questions towards the end of this hour. So Brandy, welcome, and take it away.
Can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
Oh, good. All right. Well, hello, everyone. I'm really happy to be here and talk with you today. Actually, I'm also excited to read the report in a little bit more detail. I had an opportunity to talk with Jackson last week, and we were talking about the report, and Elizabeth sent a copy of it, and I think I've barely skimmed the surface. And so hopefully what I'm going to talk with you about this morning kind of aligns and resonates with your thoughts. But I'm going to kind of focus on my utility and what we have going on for us, and then perhaps that will spur some additional conversation. A little fun fact, I don't know if you knew this, but Traverse City Light and Power is actually the youngest municipal utility in the state of Michigan. We're the last, most recent one in 1912 to create a utility. And it started out as obviously electric services um, in the 1970s. And when it actually started out in 1912, the city commission or city council actually governed the utility operations. It wasn't until the 1970s that we created a separate and autonomous utility board. Um, and this is my board of directors right here. This is they are appointed by the city council. They're on rotating terms. One of the cool attributes I think about my particular board is that two of the members are actually members of city council or the city commission. That's what we refer to it up here. But it's they have rotating terms. The longest member on our board right now is John Taylor. He's been there I feel like in excess of 10 years or so. But this is the board that brought me on back in March of 2022. Another thing, and I know it's not the focus of our discussion, but I think it's definitely relevant to this discussion in terms of access to resources and access to technology. We started up a telecom internet business a few years ago, actually, right when COVID started. Prior to that, we were doing it in a commercial sense, but on a residential perspective, we actually started that up a couple years ago. And the goal behind that was to introduce internet diversity in Northern Michigan because there just really wasn't one. And so that's our fight right now. It's one of the things that is like big. And it really does, I think it's in alignment. There's some definite synergies, I think, on the municipal electric utility front and the efforts there. Here a little a bit. I call them our fast facts or just our stats about our utility. We serve roughly, and this is just for the electric side, roughly 13,000 customers. We've been in operation for 111 years. And in terms of our size, and usually we talk in terms of like our highest peak is 66 megawatts. So that's not super huge for a super huge utility, but it is a decent size, especially in northern Michigan. I have about 43 employees and hopefully growing. I've got some vacancies there. And then when it comes to the utility lines, both primary and secondary, about 457 miles of infrastructure there that we maintain. Um, one of the things that we pride ourselves as saying is that we make money to stay in business. We don't stay in business to make money. And so our roots and our community connection is what drives us, as with every, I think, municipal utility or community owned utility. But we do pride. I think one of the biggest things that my employees say is they obviously enjoy working with their coworkers, but being out to get into the community and stay rooted in the community is what keeps them going on a day-to-day basis. Especially when I've got like larger utilities trying to poach my talent, they still keep coming back to they are vested in the community that they live in and that they serve. Safety is a huge, huge piece for us. We spend a lot on safety. It is integral, I think, just in the basic operations. You think about we have a commodity that can give as well as take away life. And so safety is one of the things that is very near and dear to us. We have regular trainings, audit programs. We're actually developing a safety improvement plan right now, but we've gone 4 years without a lost time incident, and that's a huge accomplishment. Being able to make certain that each employee goes home the same way they came is a goal, and so we take it relatively serious. Reliability, right here, you actually see instead of utility lines, you see trees and plantings. We are a very pro-green, renewable community that prides our natural resources, but part of that reliability is ensuring that vegetation is healthy, is placed in the right places. And so we wrap in vegetation tree management as part of our reliability program. Here's just a couple pictures of my guys. Continuous education and improvement is something that they're very passionate about. This fellow down here on the lower left side of the corner is Dan. He just finished up some lineman training for the control center. He's actually been with the utility for a number of years, but recently took the extra step to make certain he got another certification just to make certain that he's staying current. I got a couple individuals that are in that boat as well. And so let's talk about some of the things, or I'm going to mention some of the things that we're focused on from an industry perspective. A lot of these, I think, line up with what was mentioned in the report, but I'm going to talk with you about them from our perspective. And then I'm going to dive a bit more into the number two in terms of what we're doing. And so, of the top 5 items that I would say I'm worried about or concerned about as a utility leader, one is the people impact, enhancing that customer experience, which in essence means that I have customers that are much more interested in the energy and the service that they receive. And so I want to make certain that they're educated, they know how they're managing their bills, their resources. That whole customer centricity is something that's evolving, as well as with my employees. My employees need to make certain that they're keeping up. They're out working day-to-day jobs, and a lot of the things when it comes to the municipal utilities, at least smaller utilities, is that I have a number of individuals who I would say have multiple hats. They're doing multiple jobs, but the job isn't any different than a larger utility. They still have to stay up on current skill sets, the industry trends, while still managing multiple hats. And so the people impact is probably the first and foremost most important thing that I am primarily focused with on a day-to-day basis. Climate health is the discussion that isn't new to the Traverse City region. Our utility was the first to like to have a 100% renewable goal by or before 2040. Um, but being able to strategize and focus on to what end and how are we measuring success has been where we're focused our discussion over the past year or so. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. The decentralized utility. The traditional business model where one utility is providing the services for a number of customers is starting to fade away. Regardless of where you are on the spectrum of accepting that, more and more customers are becoming more focused on understanding how energy works. They want to become a player, they want to provide their own energy and being able to explore what the role of the utility is and supporting that journey will be really the discussion of the future. And it's an exciting one. um, Resilient, reliable, intelligent infrastructure. Like I mentioned previously, just because we're small, our rate base may not be super huge, there may not be deep pockets, but being able to ensure that the system is resilient, is reliable, as well as technology intelligent is the case regardless of which utility we are. And part of our fiber and our smart grid endeavor was actually meant to kind of piggyback off of that. We installed fiber and have been working on grid resilience with communications and technology over the past few years. The opportunity to provide internet service alongside of that is just a double benefit. And so, in order for a lot of the things that we'll talk about in the future to happen, it all centers around communication and data. And that's where we get with that last piece, the technology and the data analytics. Having access to so much data, more so than we ever had, is offering us an opportunity to really evaluate and how we're going to go forward with our future. And those are a lot of the things that are kind of driving our discussion today as we kind of move forward. Decarbonization is really kind of the focus of our climate action plan. So we started out to develop a climate action plan last year. And in essence, what I like to call it is it's an integrated resource plan on steroids. And an integrated resource plan is just an opportunity for us to plan how we're going to meet our energy needs of our customers with the resources that we have available to us, whether it's generation resources or technology resources. For us, and as with any other utility, actually, you still look at the industry. You look and see what's going on with these specific pieces in terms of what does your portfolio mix look like? What are demand response programs? How do we shave that peak, that maximum amount where customers are spiking their energy use? Energy efficiency. What's the best use of energy? I mean, if we are going to be utilizing carbon emitting resources, which ones make the most sense for what particular time, for what duration of time? And then beneficial electrification, electrifying both homes as vehicles, getting customers involved, and that's what the DER journey is about. And then how do we integrate battery storage? And so these are all items that most IRPs are taking a look at. The difference between us and what we're doing this past year and we're moving forward with developing is how do we not only look at these, but how do we develop programs that get us forward a little bit further? And so, one of the biggest pieces that we are finding is that community literacy is really where we need to kind of start. Our stakeholder engagement with our customers involved surveys, focus groups, one on one meetings. And at the end of the day, one of the biggest pieces that walked away from is that our community is very interested, but they don't know what they don't know. And more specifically, they want to be better consumers and they want us to push the envelope and leverage technology resources. but we need to kind of meet them where they are on that journey. And so that's the reason why community literacy is at the bottom right there, but it's really intended to kind of lift up where our efforts are going to be in all of these spaces. So these next couple slides, what I'm going to share with you is I'm going to take what I had with this slide and tell you how that translates to the future. So you've seen maybe these terms before, whether it be in the report or the internet, but how do we make it work for a utility and its community? The first set is focused on customer energy optimization. So, how do we take all of those technologies and bundle it up into programs that work for customers? And one of the biggest pieces that we'll talk about is how do we make what we have go as far as we can go? And then what conversations and what pieces do we need to, I think, broach into? So building envelope is a big thing, definitely in northern Michigan. When it comes to going all electric or electrifying, people want to make certain that their buildings aren't wasting money and more specifically are working with the technology. And so what we're exploring is actually updating rebate programs that are that will address that. And so this is going to be something new and different for us. Um, Also taking a look continuously at energy efficiency and energy waste reduction. The trend and the focus over the past years since the program has started has been to leverage LED lighting. LED lighting is maximized. I don't know about you, but I can't buy an incandescent in the store anymore. All there is LED lights. So the question is how do we push the envelope and go a little bit further when LED lights has been what we've been relied on to get us to the goals that we have been accomplishing lately? um, Continuing to leverage municipal and regional partnerships. For us, there may be an opportunity for us to pair and partner with the municipality, like the city of Traverse City, and their water department, and perhaps look at district heating that might be able to have an efficient use of the water. Our utility doesn't deal with water here in Traverse City, but they do, and there might be an opportunity there. Being able to really fully roll out demand response programs. And for us, a lot of that is starting out with time of use rates. Our investor owned utilities, actually, they kind of started with the time of use rate journey a whole lot faster than we did. And they just kind of ripped the band aid off. We have been taking a little bit of a slower approach. But we do plan on ramping that up because it is probably the biggest way to influence customer behavior when it comes to energy use. And it's so that they can kind of have a little bit more control, see what price signals are coming in, what are some benefits that they can get from being able to have smart thermostats and things like that. So those are just, I think, scratching the surface a little bit on that. Behind BTM is just behind the meter solar and customer storage. All that is customers owning the solar generation and the storage. And so we do have a number of customers who kind of started that journey with having solar panels on their roofs or having batteries. What we did over the past year is we actually expanded the cap of that so that we can see how many customers really want it to come on board. And then we're evaluating more of a net billing program moving forward, as well as trying to do some encouragement with customers to actually start generating their own. For us, and the way we work in terms of our network transmission, it benefits us when customers are partners. That's not the case with every utility in the state. Every utility is kind of configured a little differently. So I always like to put that as like a mini disclaimer. But for us, it does work for us. And it really can work for us if we plan for it. Now, before I leave this slide, one of the biggest pieces that I want to share in terms of customer energy optimization, and probably the piece that I'm most excited about, is the fact that when it comes to the building envelope, energy efficiency, demand response programs, as well as storage, we're looking to bundle and enhance our rebates for such programs to basically be in alignment with an effort to monetize both climate and health impacts. Um, which is different from ordinary energy savings. And what I always like to make the example of is when we're looking at programs for energy savings alone, if a customer wants to electrify, they want to influence their carbon output, their kilowatt hours will probably go up, which means that right now they wouldn't get any resource or help to help them on that climate journey. We want to start helping customers on that climate journey. So a customer comes to me and they want to get an induction stove. They ordinarily wouldn't get a rebate under ordinary energy savings. However, from a climate and health impact perspective, there is value. And so those are some of the things that we're looking to change as we're moving forward over the next 5 years at Traverse City. The next section, and I hope I'm not going too fast, but the next section is about the ease to engage. So we talked about how do customers optimize the energy that they're using. What spaces do we actually have to touch on to get them to have more effective use? The last piece, and probably the biggest, is how do we make it easier for the customer? I mentioned meeting them on the journey and the path that they are, but a lot of this is with the idea of ease to engage. I like to say sometimes when you deal with a website, I want to minimize my number of clicks. If it's a minimal number of clicks, it's working for me. That's the case when it comes to the utility and energy experience. We should have it so that customers understand how the rebates are working, being able to maybe have an energy coach. And even if it's not if it's not through Traverse City Light and Power, maybe it's a partnership that we develop, because it's one of the things I think that makes municipal utilities such resilient partners, is that we know how to help each other out and we've got strong networks amongst ourselves. Our key accounts, being able to provide more guidance from a key account perspective. Other utilities in the state of Michigan have very robust key account programs. Traverse City Light and Powers is not as robust, but it's an opportunity for us to enhance that. um, Having a commercial kitchen demonstration. Now, this isn't something where we will start hosting cooking shows or cooking demonstrations, but perhaps partner with a local resource that does. And the objective here is to teach people how to cook outside of natural gas. It's one thing to talk about wanting to go all electric and bring homes on that path. But when you have people that just really need to know what's possible, being able to offer demonstrations and teachings in that regard is going to go a long way. And so we've identified kind of a commercial kitchen, or maybe a partnership with a local community agency up here in Traverse City that can help us with those programs that teach people how do we cook on an induction stove, and get away from natural gas. uh, Contractor engagement programs. One of the biggest things that we ran into during our stakeholder interviews and our focus groups was that there were customers that wanted to either have net zero homes or all electric homes or all electric buildings, but they didn't feel like they had a good contractor base to work from. So, one of the things that we've identified is that we need to start building that consortium of contractors that are available to provide that level of expertise, that familiarity, and more specifically, maybe there's a learning ground where we can kind of bridge the divide. Maybe we can be that platform to help them co-educate one another with resources to not only respond to customers that are interested in exploring these more innovative spaces, but also how can they educate and bring other contractors along as well. And so both of these last two slides is a lot that we're exploring right now. They're all intended to focus on how we're leveraging our energy portfolio, going 100% renewable by or before 2040, and we should be about 41% by 2025. I think that's where we're lined up right now. Um, Energy waste reduction, electrification, storage, demand response programs, and getting customers on board to help us with our electric generation needs. So that is all I have. Hopefully, I didn't go too fast. Um, I'd love to get questions. I can talk about anything. I told Jackson I have a drop down mind. So you just let me know what you're curious about. I can unshare Jackson if that's easier.
Yeah, let's unshare so it's just the two of us.
Okay.
Um, Thank you for that. So there's already some questions and chatter in the chat. I'm actually gonna frame and bring up the first question I'm seeing in the chat first, which is so a big theme of this report is the resource and capacity challenges that public utilities face, particularly smaller public utilities in navigating the energy transition, both like for small utilities that just have limited capacity and for bigger utilities that have big sunk cost problems with old fossil fuel assets. And you have had the experience of working for a utility now that, as I understand it, is mostly purchasing power on the market.
Mhm.
And historically with Board of Water and Light, with the utility that owned a substantial amount of generation. Um, so there's some big questions about the energy transition. One thing, this came up yesterday a little bit, and I think that, and Nat has brought it back up in the chat. Wondering if you could speak to the questions of debt and financing sourcing to make sort of capital improvements or make big sort of programmatic or infrastructure investments, and your sense of like if that has felt harder or easier for a public entity, like harder and easier for in your work in municipal utility sector, relative to what you're seeing in, parallel sort of peer utilities of other models.
Yeah, so Traverse City, so the avenues, and let me read the question just a little bit. Um,
It's an
from
I when we were prepping for this panel, I want everyone to know Brandy was like, I get very in the weeds, and I don't know if people want that. And Nat has immediately been like, absolutely, please, in the
like
weeds
jump
about debt
in.
financing.
Okay. So I want to talk about it. So let me differentiate. There is the avenues from an individual customer if we're pushing distributed energy resources and investments. And then there's the avenues for a utility scale financing. I'm assuming this question you're focused on that utility side scale. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that what Nat is like getting at here is a question of when you need to bring in capital to finance something beyond your normal revenue streams, right, from sales. What does that look like? What are the challenges or eases from a public utility standpoint?
Yeah, so a rule of thumb generally is, you really want to look at capital CapEx expenditures and investments if you're looking at the payback period over a particular period of time. Our utility has, and then the avenue for that would be like municipal bonding, municipal bond financing. Being able to do that, I would say, like for us, I would say has been relatively good. And I would say that's the case with most municipals as well. And the reason why is because the credit rating for most municipal utilities tends to be relatively high. Ours is relatively high, and we had little to no debt for our utility. But a lot of it was because we actively invested in our finance strategy and our financial planning strategy to minimize having to go back for debt issuances every so often. So it's part of that like 6-year capital plan and investment. That's how our strategy works, so that we're always investing forward. Now, being able to go to the market and to get bonds, most of the time investors are like happy to invest in utilities. At least that's been my experience. And the reason why is because it's kind of a sure thing. If you think about it, everybody always requires electricity. And if you're dedicating your revenues to make certain you're paying that debt, they know that that's an investment that is going to have a return. So being able to acquire that it is not difficult. And more specifically, it's usually not a heavy burden, especially on the municipality because it's tied to electric revenues. It's not maybe so easy if you're thinking about it outside of that. So if you're looking at it as, oh, well, I'm going to have this debt that comes on to my community, if there's revenue that's tied to that, it's a little bit easier to deal with, and it usually pays back itself over a particular period of time. Many utilities actually are in the position of refinancing actually after a few years, meaning that they're so far ahead of where they are they actually are able to refinance and maybe give that kind of give that money back a little bit. But one of the values with municipal bonding is that they're tax exempt strategies, and so it makes it a little bit easier to kind of to I guess manage, so to speak. Um, but in essence, for us, it really we're looking at the cash flow, like what's our cash flow that we need to maintain operations? How do we spread the rate impact to the customers? And so sometimes it's easier to spread that over a 20 to 30-year period of time based on how assets um, depreciate. There you go, depreciate, as opposed to like a one-time hit to the rate base. We actually went out for bonding. Actually, I don't know if I would say it's bonding, but it's akin to bonding. But we took advantage of a USDA loan, which has a low interest payback. It's zero tax, but low interest. And we recently we went through the process for that type of financing this past year, and it was for our smart grid investment. And so that's investing in grid resilience and technology, but then it also has that side benefit of offering internet services for Northern Michigan.
Mm. That so I'm gonna come back to the chat in a second, but it makes me want to ask another question. So another thing that kind of came up it as a theme of conversation when we were interviewing municipal utilities in this project was the ability to integrate public works and the sort of efficiencies that people were able to get there. So people talked about like, yeah, we have staff people who like, cut the lawn sometimes and have the credentials to do basic electric work some of the other times, right?
Mhm.
Um, and you kind of raised like even like tree planting is happening and like some integration with the telecom. So I just love to hear a little bit more about like any of the things you sort of get to do in terms of integrating like the telecom and energy utilities, and if there's any sort of like unique ways that you get to hire staff that kind of cover both, or like ways that you get to kind of like make both work a little better by kind of tying them together.
So that's what we're actively exploring since I came on board. So one of the things that we engaged a consultant to do that actually started off, um, I'm going to say maybe a couple months ago, was to do a business model and workforce readiness assessment. So I have, employees that are on the telecom fiber side. I've got employees that are on the electric side, and I've got some employees that support both. The question as we kind of evolve and grow is what makes sense. If it's effective and efficient, then that works. If it's to save a buck, that's not sustainable. So that's where I'm really kind of deviating, trying to make certain that I understand, because I do have employees. So you mentioned our generation. So we actually are a part group owner of like a natural gas facility in Kalkaska, and we get about half of our capacity right now from them, at least until things change. And that's staffed by TCOP employees and workers, but they also have stake and locate jobs and construction and maintenance jobs, or not, they're not at that facility. Does that make sense for the right now? Yes. Does that make sense for the future as we evolve? That's where I'm exploring right now. Um, there obviously are some efficiency gains, clearly, but the piece that I'm really focused on right now is what's that return on investment to the customer? What's moving employees forward? I also want employees to feel like they're flourishing in their jobs. Are they doing things that they're passionate about? And I'd like to be able to support an atmosphere that's going to, allow them to do both. The quick answer to your question is I'm actively exploring that since I came on board. There are a lot of people who do a number of different things. Is it the right fit for right now? It's working. I just don't know if it is sustainable and if it is for the long-term future.
So this actually, I want to jump back to chat here because this raises up the question that Jonathan raised, which is that, a lot of utilities, and this is not uniformly tied to ownership models, are very like hesitant and even like push back on rooftop solar. I want to ask kind of like what would you say are kind of like maybe the unique conditions of TCLP or just the general sort of like what is it that means that has created this condition where TCLP is like actively like embracing and advancing what many other utilities kind of across the ownership spectrum are pushing back on.
Yeah, so I'll dive a little bit into the weeds here, and hopefully it's not too boring or it's interesting. So I mentioned we have the same requirements of large utilities, any other utility, which means that we have to make certain that we provide energy to all our customers at reliable times, at high peak times, they call that peaking times, but all times. And what goes into ensuring that we're meeting our customer needs, it's part of that IRP process, is what's dictated by our regional regulatory or regional transmission or RTO agency like MISO. And in that sense, what MISO does is MISO, where Michigan is one of the members, is it says that you have to make certain that you can meet all of your energy needs. And here's a certain number of what that looks like. However, you can deduct from that number based on the number of customers that are generating for themselves. And so for us, because we are a network transmission customer, that number changes based on the number of customers that are generating for themselves. That does not mean that we're not required to provide backup energy because we do. You know, if the sun isn't shining right now and the wind's not blowing and the battery's not going as long as we need, they still need us to step in and make certain we accommodate that. However, that amount of energy that I have to purchase through contract, through the network, or through the transmission arrangement is changed by the number of customers that are generating their own electricity. Not every utility is in that particular situation, but for us, that works for us. And that's the reason why we're exploring more of, like, I would say, a net billing type of arrangement versus net billing. A lot of it is because we want to take advantage of that. If I can save on what I am procuring from a contractual basis because the energy will always flow. It's going to come. And then I can invest that money to other forward thinking technologies. That's the strategy. But for us, a lot of it is due to our transmission configuration.
Cool. Thank you. And I will say there's many people in the chat being like, I love the weeds. Let's get into the weeds.
Okay.
So it's very welcomed. Um, uh, I'm just checking the chat here. Yeah. So I think another question coming out of the Cleveland crew is so like you said this a little bit, but how do you procure that balance of power from outside DC? So it sounds like there's some self generation of customers.
Mhm.
This the gas plant provides a significant amount of capacity. Like, what is the and I think specifically these are Cleveland folks. So curious, like, what are the contractual arrangements? Like, how do you actually source that power from
Yeah,
TCLP?
so I'll talk a little bit about my portfolio, our energy portfolio right now. So the way our portfolio is situated is there are certain projects that we co-invest in with other utilities. Um, some of those projects, like two of them are natural gas, fossil fuel, like Bell River and Camp Bell. Camp Bell actually will be retiring relatively soon, and Bell River is converting from coal to natural gas relatively soon. So we have investments in that. That's probably that's the fossil fuel. And then I mentioned the CT, that which is a peaker facility. It's not a base load facility, which means that it only generates when the market is demanding and there is definitely a demand in the state for generation. Otherwise, the balance of our portfolio is based on renewables. Now, there are some solar array projects that we are directly invested in through power purchase agreements, but they're not just ordinary bilateral agreements where we're purchasing on the market. These are investments that are 20-year investments in solar arrays, and as well as with wind. So we have investments there as well. And then there is, and those particular ones that I'm mentioning right now are not within the Traverse City footprint area. They're in other areas of the state of Michigan. One is in Shiawassee County. The other is in like central Michigan and like Ithaca. That's like the renewable wind. And then like on the thumb, there's a next there. There's a thumb re- uh, wind farm out in the thumb. We do have a larger utility solar array within the Traverse City footprint as well. And most of that is actually being utilized by the city government. So we built that city solar array and we dedicated it to their operations because they wanted to be 100% renewable, but they wanted to do it more than just on RECs. They wanted to make certain they have the energy and that they can see it. And so we do have that within our area as well. Um, did I answer did I go through that, Jackson? Did I answer that question okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
So it's a
Um,
combination of PPAs, actual projects, and then where there is a small gap, I should say, then we'll do something on the market beyond that. Yeah.
cool. I'm gonna keep jumping between chat and some of my sort of broadly prepared questions. But the chat is active, so I'm gonna I think keep going there. So I think Jay is raising this question of, are you doing exploring community-based like solar and storage microgrids that include arrangements for customers to install their own rooftop and have that be part of a like community-based microgrid. I would sort of like add in there like kind of like storage capacity or virtual power plants or anything like that in terms of like starting to integrate those customer resources into utility operations in a different way. And you can see the whole of Jay's question in there, but I think there's just this question about like, um, are you looking at sort of like broader microgrids as part of the way of like integrating that customer generation?
So I will speak to it in terms of like path of maturity. So we do have, we partner with Cherryland Co-op Electric for, actually, I think it may have been the state's first community solar
Oh, it
investment.
was. Yeah.
Yeah, and it allows customers to, and I say I'm going to talk about steps, invest in a solar array, even though it might not be on their home and how to finance that. And so that was kind of, I would say, the beginning part of that community solar investment journey. We do have some customers and we do have an agency locally here, which is a great partner, and they're called Groundworks. They actually have been promoting a program called My Solar. And what that program was is they actually worked with a developer to try to get as many customers as they can to go in on a larger procurement so that they can procure it at scale. So they can kind of get better rates and so that they can do smaller placements of solar arrays. And I think predominantly it's on roofs. We only have one customer that's actually invested in battery storage right now. Battery storage tends to be the most expensive investment that there is. But what we're hoping is that our city, actually, like our municipality, they actually get a project going where they will actually start more of a demonstration of the battery and the solar for a particular building. They went out for grants, a grant through the MPSC, and they got an awarded a grant that allows them to do that. That's the storage is possible, but for really because of that grant opportunity. And that will probably be, I think, for us in our community, the first taste and see and kind of like akin to a microgrid. Now, what it's missing is a control system. I mean, that usually is like the trifecta. You've got the storage, the battery, and the control system. But it is going to start getting customers familiar with battery storage and how to utilize that. One of the things that we're hoping with our ease to engage is to be able to provide a platform or a resource so that customers can kind of take advantage of dollars like the city did for certain projects and investments and see how they can leverage that money so that they can do more demonstrations. So we're just I think just scratching the surface on that. I do have some larger commercial customers that may be interested in doing more of a mini microgrid type of arrangement, but they're not ready to be totally disconnected just yet. They still need us as like a backup. And so we're still exploring that. We're hoping the energy literacy process will kind of get more folks a little bit more on board with that.
So let me, I'm gonna ask, and we're kind of like coming up on our last 15 minutes here, and I've just been jumping back and forth between
Mhm.
my questions and actually, hang on, let me remember what we how we actually scheduled all this. I'm so deep in the conversation, I've lost track of time. um, I want to ask, um, just raise this like other theme from the report is that there has been this big movement across the country for expansion of public power of late. Right, there have been policy proposals for federal public power authorities coming back to do everything from coordinate transmission to support new build out of clean energy. There's been an array of municipalization campaigns at the local level. There's been this big sort of like emergent movement to expand the sector. Um, and that, a theme of the report just directly is that there's kind of a disconnect between that movement and in many ways the incumbent sector, which generally has collegial relationships with other utilities that public power advocates kind of in this emergent space are finding themselves in protracted conflict with because it works directly against their business interests for them to lose parts of their service territory.
Mhm.
And so I think like what is coming up is this question of like, given that the incumbent sector is has to operate its business, right, and given that there is this sort of like conflict in the emergent sector, um, how can public power advocates better connect and build with existing public power institutions? And how can the existing institutions connect with this emergent space that's really coming in strong with the kind of like energy transition and equity framing? It's a sticky question, but would love to hear your thoughts on like what is sort of possible in terms of building and connecting and strengthening those bridges.
So, I say it's kind of fascinating that we're having this discussion on utility or communities wanting to create municipal utilities. And the reason why I say that is there was a big push from American Public Power and the municipal utility community, I want to say, but maybe 10, 10 years ago, so maybe 15, where we were in danger of being bought up by the big guys. And a lot of it was associated maybe a little bit with some politics. People didn't like what was going on locally. People wanted to get on boards and utility boards, and so that was a danger and that was a risk. And so there was a huge effort amongst our community to demonstrate the value of public power and the value of community ownership, to really reinvent and re-explore why did we start this way back at the dawn of the turn of the century of the 20th century from the beginning. And what I found was that I think started seeing, I say about maybe 6 years or so ago, my investor-owned counterparts started promoting what looked like a perspective of that community connection. And so I feel like we won to some extent. That was great. That's good. So what's the next piece from that avenue? And one of the things that I kind of feel is absolutely necessary, and this is just where customers are, is customers want to be in control of their destiny and their future. And the best way to do it is to have the closeness of your utility counterparts. Now, it might be your investor-owned utility having more of a local presence within the community that you serve and that they can readily respond to the needs of the community. I can tell you I can do that easier because I have a smaller community. My investors are my neighbors. They know where I live, literally. And so they can come to my house and these are my owners. And this is something that is just unique to us. We're able to respond faster. We can do a number of things faster, but I'd like to say it's not because we're just so awesome and beautiful, but there is value in being close together and also being able to understand and communicate easier. Where I feel like we can work, and I think if you are energy and community resilient enthusiasts, the best thing that you can do, and this is the thing that needs to happen even in my own community right now, is learn what you don't know. You know, you got to think, people who didn't have the technology we had, didn't have the regulation we had years ago, were able to figure it out. And, there is not a one size fits all. Each community is different and we celebrate our differences. Each community is different across the country. But the reality is that the more you understand, the more you know, even if it seems a little daunting, the better equipped we can put that right size in terms of what makes sense for what particular community. Whether it is doing some type of utility scale microgrid and building upon that so that it's like a block as opposed to a couple homes. Maybe it looks like that. There's nothing that keeps us from doing things like that right now. Or maybe it is creating a municipal utility, starting off at city commission and then actually creating a separate and autonomous utility board. But it really does begin, I think, with discussion and understanding these are the things that we have to deal with. It does not mean that anyone that's not part of that heavy corporate infrastructure can't figure it out. They can figure it out too. It's just a matter of focusing and dedicating resources and collaborating. Our utility, I will tell you, wouldn't be able to do what they couldn't would do, be able to do what they do, but for the joint action agency that they have with MPPA and American Public Power Association, where there's a resource need, we call each other and we say, "Hey, can you come and help us out?" If I'm having a staffing need, my neighboring co-op reaches out to me. So I think that's something that's unique. You're never alone, but I think realizing, yeah, this is the ball web of the complexity in terms of regulation and resources and how contracts work. But I'll tell you, I don't know why it can't be figured out. I'll just say that. And I'll tell you, if I can figure it out and I'm just a dumb lawyer, anybody can figure it out.
Careful, you'll offend the other lawyers on the call.
It's okay. I could say it.
uh, it's wonderful. We're in our last few minutes here. Um, I oh man, there's so many deeper things I want to get into. I'm gonna just check chat and see if there are any questions that haven't been addressed from folks. Um, no, I don't think so. Um, yeah, so I think that let me say this. I think that there's this question of like, um, and we talked a little bit about this as we were kind of prepping. Jay just wanted you to like repeat and reshare kind of what the governance model is. I believe it's elected utility board, but tell me if that's not the case.
No, so they're not elected. They
Okay,
actually are appointed by our city commission. So
okay,
they're appointed by the city commission is elected, but our utility board is not elected. Yeah.
cool. Thank you.
Mhm.
I guess that the one thing I will raise, yeah, and Sandeep is raising this question. Love to hear your thoughts on IRA direct pay and the sort of new direct pay options for solar incentives and other DG incentives, and how helpful that will be to you and other public power partners as you kind of navigate this transition.
So I'm actually still trying to navigate the waters for the direct pay details. I'll let you know that right now. But where it will be helpful is ordinarily and actually, one of the reasons why we do PPAs with these solar projects is because the developer could get tax incentives, and it made sense at the time for being able to not staff the operation of that facility, and they received the tax benefits, and that flowed through us financially. With the IRA direct pay benefits, it's going to change how we're looking at those projects and those investments. Should we start engaged, like building it ourselves and maintaining it ourselves as opposed to doing a PPA arrangement? The IRA direct pay is going to offer some more clarity with that. What I do like about it is it does give us an opportunity to receive that direct tax benefit, so you speak, in terms of like a tax avoidance, but maybe some type of credit or dollar that comes to the utility or the community. So that's the idea behind it. My staff, actually, I got a couple individuals on our staff right now who are really trying to navigate and understand how that exactly works. We do have some consultants and contractors that are also doing that right now as well. So that because they do, even though you have a direct benefit coming directly to the utility, and we might not necessarily need some of those larger partners. We're still going to need each other for the time being. And I think they're kind of sorting through how they are going to perform as well. And so I wish I had more clarity on that. But I the goal is great. How to get there is part of the reason why we wanna offer, I think, resources just to our customers in general, because there is a lot of money, infrastructure money out there that I'm gonna tell you we're all paying for it for tax when it comes from a tax perspective. How to realize the benefit of it is not very clear right now, and so we wanna kind of eliminate that knowledge, gap.
Yeah, got it. And also, on the a sidebar to this, I serve on the board of a local sort of consumer co-op we've started here in Southeast Michigan, and one of the things we are navigating is what the everyone is trying to figure out how the heck does the direct pay actually work. um,
Absolutely.
um, I think so. I will close with, I have one more question, and welcome any closing thoughts. But from your standpoint as right, as manager of a utility that is um, pretty aggressively trying to manage this transition, off of fossil fuels and thinking about the customers and the workforce and everyone that has to make it through that transition whole. Um, uh, I want to ask, like, if you were thinking about, you mentioned, right, we've talked a little bit about direct pay. We've talked about how some of these the initial storage project in TCLP came because of a Public Service Commission grant. Um, what sort of like support and actions do you think like you see being really essential or helpful from state and federal government? Like what sort of like policy actions, whether it's dollars or like other things about like rules or structures, would really aid um TCLP and other utilities in your position as you try to figure out how to navigate this transition. So thinking about what sort of structural change would enable and support the moves you're trying to make.
So I would say, the biggest thing, what comes to mind when you mention that is flexibility. So there is no one size fits all approach to energy policies when it comes to various communities. I think the effort to regulate us all is constraining us all. You've got some communities like ours, I would say that we're relatively progressive. And then you have some communities that can barely get an energy waste reduction program going, or more or less can kind of come together to be in an agreement on how they want to set some policies and some trends. And so really the flexibility and the opportunity to really observe what each community is doing and what's working for each community, um, I believe it's necessary. There is some existing legislation being proposed out there, but the proposal I think is very limiting. And it's not to say that I think the intent of the legislation isn't well thought out. It's just the opportunity to get more people on board with where we're going may be constrained with how it's written. So, I think about like the energy waste reduction legislation. I want to offer rebates for climate health and regulatory health impacts. It's relatively difficult to do that based on how the legislation is currently written. It's so focused on energy waste reduction savings. everybody wants to have savings from an energy perspective. I say we make money to stay in business. We're not in business to make money. But if we do want to make an impact on where we need to go, I need a little bit of flexibility to have my programs to work the way I need them to kind of work. It is not going that approach of what I'm doing is not going to work for every particular community. And so I think the legislation and the policy needs to be flexible enough to offer some diversity of perspective that is responsive to the communities that the utility is serving. And I think that's probably the reason why we've had this biggest draw of customers wanting to generate their own. They want to put together their own utility groups, is because their needs are not being seen. If the legislation is too broad stroke and is a one size fits all approach, it will not work. It's going to break, and more specifically, there may even be a pendulum effect to the opposite end, where we'll be forced to stay on fossil fuels for a longer period of time, or carbon emitting resources for a longer period of time, as opposed to maybe having a little bit more of a mix of options. But that's my 2 cents. That's my personal soapbox there.
We're gonna close on that personal soapbox, because that's a great soapbox to close on. I want to thank you for coming and sharing so much of your wisdom and experience with us. I know that many folks have been benefiting from it. Folks have been diving in the chat. Um, I yeah, like we're getting some clap emojis from folks.
Thank you.
Um, we are going to be moving right into our next panel, where we're actually going to hear from Mayor Buffalo of Columbia, Missouri, and we're going to hear from Daniel Gray, advocating around many similar issues in Cleveland. And so again, just thank you so much for coming and joining us. And Eric, I'm going to kick it back to you to transition us into our next session. And I believe that we have or had everyone on. I know Jeremy's here, but I think that we can
Yep.
start to transition. And Liz, I think we can cut recording and then restart recording, so we get two positions here. Thanks, everyone.